All right, so the count is 6. Let us stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Flag is on this side of the room. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated. We're just going to acknowledge a moment of silence. Thank you. We need to adopt tonight's agenda. Baker, Walker, questions? Hearing none. All in favor? Any opposed or abstaining? Count is 6 on the pledge, on the agenda. And if we could, I want to welcome you to tonight's voting session. And if you'd all just join me in saying our mission statement. To inspire the passion for learning and educating all students to achieve their full potential. So tonight we'll be voting. I know we have a couple of presentations and later on public session, but tonight we're going into executive session for the purpose of legal updates, for the purpose of examining personnel and hiring, particularly to certain persons. Anything else? Yes. And updates from our engineering and construction firms. Is there first? Baker, Walker, questions?
Yes, question.
Go ahead, sir.
As pertains to the update from our engineers,
Yes.
I'm going to question what part of that is for executive session.
Yes, we're going into executive session because I think there are some items that we need to discuss that should not come out in public at this point right now. It would be better served for the board to hear first.
Got it. So then my question to the attorney, so that we're properly noticed, what reasons stated would the board be legally allowed to go into executive session and discuss with our architect so that no one challenges us tonight?
So without knowing the specifics of the conversation, because that is new information to me at this moment, I can't answer that question. So we can go into executive session, and if it's something that should be discussed out in public, we will table that discussion and have it back out in public.
Got it. Thank you so much.
And just so you know, this was new information that we received today. So.
Got it. Thank you. No, I'm just making sure.
Yes.
All right, so all things that are appropriate for public consumption will be presented in the public. There was a first by Baker, second by Walker. All questions at this point have been entertained. Is there any other objection or any other comment? Hearing none. All in favor? Any opposed or abstaining? We are entering executive session at 5:39 p.m. Executive session will take place down the hall in a large conference room. Once public session begins, once we come out, we'll begin again in this very room. Thank you. distribute. All right, for housekeeping, coming out of executive session, that was Moore and Walker, 700 at 7:13 p.m. Thank you, community, for allowing us an additional 10 or 11 minutes to come out. Just a couple of things regarding personnel that needed to be discussed. And now I turn it over to our superintendent for presentations.
Yes, good evening. Tonight I'm excited to welcome our high school to come up and present to us this evening. They will be presenting on their graduation rate and all of the strategies that they've been doing since, since the summertime to prepare for the school year. So with that being said, I'd like to welcome up our high school principal, Mr. Sibley's, and his team.
Welcome. As Mr. Sibley's and his team transitions to the podium, I want to definitely give a shout out to our Wyandanch Memorial High School student body and our Wyandanch Memorial High School marching band, who did an amazing job last night at the Mitchell Athletic Complex. Kudos to you, you represented us well. The Board of Education, all of our staff will now enter into the audience.
Took my shot.
Dr. Wright, Sean.
Three dots over on that side. Just do it.
Okay, I use my school voice. Welcome everybody to Wyandanch High School. At this time, our students will do a presentation for you. It works.
Good evening, everyone. On behalf of Wyandanch Memorial High School Social Studies Department, I'm honored to present this year's highlights from our projects-based learning and civic seal of civic readiness. Next slide, please. My name is Katie Argueta, and with me I have Jefferson Oriana and Imutianosa Aguero. Next slide. So for project-based learning, we have our Civic Action Project, Research and Act on a Local Issue, Board Meeting Project, Analyzing the Wyandanch Board of Education Meeting, and Voter Registration Drive, as well as the Hamilton Experience. Next slide, please.
Did I do that?
No, I did that.
Thank you.
Let me click the next one. Sure. Actually, me.
That's it.
We got one.
Also, the Civic Action Project empowers students to apply their knowledge of government, civics, and policy to identify, research, and take action on a real issue in the community. Students will become more civic problem solvers using data, critical thinking, and collaboration to propose meaningful solutions that align with democratic principles and community.
The next thing is the Wyandanch Memorial High School History Fair. The theme is Voices of Change, Movements That Shape Democracy. Students exhibit research presentations, spoken word, skits, and monologues as a celebration of history. And these are just a few of the examples of the exhibits that we had, fully created by students.
Following up, we have the education excursion with the Hamilton Experience Project in partnership with the Hamilton Education Program. Students attend the Broadway Hamilton show after studying U.S. history, which then connects with storytelling and history.
How do legacies of colonialism or slavery impact you?
¿Cómo le impactan los legados del colonialismo o la esclavitud?
What does freedom mean to you?
¿Qué significa la liberación para usted? Here, our scholars visited African American Museum and responded to several prompts.
Next up, we have the Seal of Civic Readiness. The Seal of Civic Readiness is a form of recognition that a student has demonstrated the civic knowledge, skills, mindsets, and experiences necessary to become an actively engaged citizen.
By definition, civic readiness is the ability to make positive difference in the public life of our communities.
The goal of civic readiness is to, 1, empower all students to make informed decisions for the public good as members of a culturally diverse, democratic society in an independent world, as well as for all students to use civic knowledge, skills, and mindsets to make decisions and take actions for themselves, their communities, and the public good. Thank you.
All right, give them another round of applause. So when the community get ready to understand, our students will be participating in board meetings throughout the school year. So before we get started with our presentation, we would like to just share a token of appreciation to our board members. We're not buying their votes. We're just showing a little token of our appreciation from the Wyandanch High School. Want you to know we appreciate all that you are trying to do, and it's essential that we always maintain a shared vision in the best interests of our students. So we thank you for what you do. We'd like to share with you the plan for the high school, school-wide plan improvement. And we have 3 priorities that's laid out here. Number 1 priority is to increase graduation rate. Priority 2 is to decrease chronic absenteeism. Priority 3, targeted support for E&L and SWD. So I will be sharing with you priority 1. My assistant principal, Ms. Devin Kane, will be doing priority 3, and Dr. Lai will be doing priority 2. My APs. Increased graduation rate. The need to increase the graduation rate has emerged as a priority since the current graduation rate is 66%, which falls below the state graduation rate of 86 by 26 percentage points. All right, so that number that you received was before the graduation rate was reconciled, and it's still under review. So the final will be coming soon. Our key strategies: tier students' academic support, high quality instructional materials and assessment across content areas, ongoing walkthroughs and observation with targeted feedback, ongoing targeted administration, teachers, support staff, instructional coaches, CPT implementation with fidelity, administrative sustainable accountability structures, extended learning opportunities for students. And again, we're sharing the strategies with the expect for the support. Measuring our success. What will success look like at the end of the year? Provide quantitative data and qualitative descriptions of where the school drives to be at the end of the 25-26 school year. 68% graduation rate. Now, when we provide this number, I want everybody to just understand our goal really is to have every student graduate from Wyandanch High School. But in order to do so, attendance plays a significant part. If students don't come to school, they simply won't learn, they won't be able to graduate. Increase graduation rate. This commitment fits seamlessly with other priorities, as improved attendance and targeted support for underperforming subgroups are critical to academic success, credit accumulation, and ultimately higher graduation rates. It reinforces our long-term goal of ensuring success for all students. Outstanding needs in order to achieve these goals: infinite campus student data, triangulation system for MTSS, adequate staffing for CPT, implementation with fidelity, after school extended, learning opportunities for students. Now, as we talk about implementation with fidelity, adequate staffing for CPT, we won't be able to reach our goals without that main support. Priority 2.
So priority 2 is to decrease chronic absenteeism. The need to decrease chronic absenteeism has emerged as a priority since the current daily attendance rate is 81%, which falls below the state attendance rate of 95% by 17.5 percentage points. Now, our key strategies: tiered attendance support, which is our MTSS, or multi-tiered support system, tiered social-emotional support, expand our CTE programming, ongoing mental health support for students and staff, our 9th grade success team, our RISE restorative daily program, and our ongoing student root cause surveys. So I really want to talk about two of the preventive strategies. So our ninth grade success team predicts 80% rate of graduation, which is very powerful. It looks at each student's grade point average, whether or not they complete the course. It looks at their attendance rate, and it also correlates their discipline rate. Is it the same discipline happening over and over again? And we get in front of it and we address it before it becomes a major problem. So we're able to help them and support them because that is our graduation class for the upcoming year. And in order for them to be successful, they must be successful in ninth grade moving forward. And they need to accumulate 5 credits in the ninth grade in order to be successful. Our RISE restorative practice breaks the school to pipeline prison system. It eliminates it. It helps us with our discipline, and it works through restorative practices, ensuring that behavior is taught as well as other subjects being taught, and research demonstrates and shows that students do learn how to conduct themselves when they are taught accordingly. So at the end of the year, what will success look like at the end of the year? We will provide quantitative data and qualitative descriptions of where the school strives to be at the end of the 2025-26 school year. We want to increase the daily attendance rate to 86% from 81%, and we also need to decrease the chronic absenteeism rate to 28% from 33%. So long-term goal, to decrease chronic absenteeism. This priority fits seamlessly with our broader goals, as reducing chronic absenteeism supports both increased graduation rates and targeted support for underperforming subgroup populations. Students who attend school consistently are more likely to access academic supports, build strong relationships, and stay on track for credit accumulation and on-time graduation. Our outstanding needs: the Infinite Campus Student Data System for the triangulation, which again is the GPA, the attendance, and the discipline. They need to be correlated. The RISE Restorative Disciplinary Program. Thank you.
Good evening. Our third priority is targeted supports for our ENL and SWD students with disability and English as a new language. We were asked to identify a district commitment. We identified this particular commitment as one that we will need extensive district support with. The district is identified for low performance of ENL students across the entire district. So when we have a district-wide concern, it will require a district-wide solution. The same with our students with disabilities, and I'll get into some of the support we've been receiving so far. This emerged as a priority because data analysis shows that ENL and SWD subgroups are consistently underperforming with significant achievement gaps that must be addressed to ensure equity and academic success for all students. ENL students are also most likely to drop out of school based on our, I would say, a 5-year analysis, or even more. The ENL students are those who are most likely to drop out of school. The key strategies that we want to implement for this particular
Commitment is, again, district-wide support for our ENL and SWD students. We want to ensure that we have research-based instructional models in place. For example, the SIOP model for our ENL students, which incorporates language acquisition along with content, not just content, and possibly a universal design for learning for SWD students. That would come out of a committee discussion, but we're looking for research-based instructional models, high-quality instructional models, ongoing professional development in this area, targeted professional development based on data analysis, ongoing professional development, not just 1 or 2 professional development sessions. No professional development could ever have an impact if it's not ongoing, sustainable, and consistent. I think those are our targeted words when we're looking for a school improvement plan to actually have impact. Mandatory teacher review and sign off for IEP and Part 154 accommodations. We have to ensure that the teachers are aware of the accommodations and that they're implementing those accommodations, and they have to be held accountable for them. We want to optimize the use of data for targeted decision making. We have a CPT, Common Planning Time schedule. Every Monday, teachers work with their teams to analyze data. It is so important that the department is present during these data analysis sessions. Tuesday, during the CPT sessions, they're reviewing best practices. Wednesdays, they are referring students who may need additional supports or possible testing. Thursday, during CPT, it's collegial lesson planning. And Friday, it's parent and family outreach. The teachers need to be present in the CPT sessions in order for that work to take place. The CPT is a critical component of the school improvement plan. Unfortunately, many of our teachers are now teaching 7 periods, which means that we don't have the entire department there. One of our sessions today had 3 teachers in the CPT because the other teachers were teaching 7 periods. So that critical work cannot happen effectively if those teams aren't present. So that's the only way to optimize the use of data and the data analysis process is to have the CPT implemented with fidelity. Extended learning opportunities for ENL and SWD students targeted for these populations. Saturday Academy is one that has historically worked in the past. We know with our ENL students, they have a lot of responsibilities after school, and we've seen historically that they're not really in attendance during after school programming, but they have come on Saturdays in the past, and we'd like to see maybe some Saturday programming brought back. We know that we cannot close learning gaps within the construct of the school hours. Those gaps would have to be closed with extended day. In our case, we are looking at before school, after school, weekends, summer programming. That's the only way to close learning gaps. So those opportunities for extended programming are critical and essential, and that's research-based. Specialized family events for our ENL and SWD students. I know our ENL, our SWD lead teacher, Ms. James, created an award ceremony just for our students with disabilities, and it's so well attended, and it's just such a great opportunity to bring the families out, and we'd like to see that continue and grow for our subgroup populations. Also, access to inclusive, high-quality instructional materials and assessments. That means a curriculum such as SABIS. Those of you who have heard SABIS, it is research-based, it is vetted. The problem with not having a coherent curriculum is that teachers have different ideas and perspectives of what rigor is. And when you have a high-quality instructional material, it is aligned with the state standards. The state standards are designed to increase complexity. It's the staircase of complexity that spirals from one grade level to the next. And it is important that that is taking place in order for productive struggle for students to actually grow academically. And when we don't have something in place that is research-based, teachers are just pulling whatever materials they deem to be rigorous, and it's not aligned with any standard in particular. I do conduct classroom observations, and I'm saying this from experience. So those are the key strategies that we would like to implement to address our ENL and SWD subgroup populations. What will success look like at the end of the year? We would like to decrease level 1 proficiency on Regents exams for subgroup populations by 2%. That may not seem like a large gap, but we want to ensure that our growth is sustainable. We want to look at continuous, sustainable growth. And right now, most of our subgroup populations are scoring at level 1, which is failing for all Regents exams across all content areas. And we would like to increase levels 3 and 4, a proficiency on Regents exams for subgroup populations, again, by 2%. We want to make sure that our goals are SMART, and they are attainable, and that they can be continuous. Long term, this priority fits closely with our efforts to decrease chronic absenteeism and increase graduation rates as students in the ENL and SWD subgroups face unique barriers to engagement and achievement. By providing targeted support, we address root causes of absenteeism and academic struggles, advancing our long-term goal of equitable success for all students. Equity means that not every student will have the same learning experience, because certain students need more than others. So we're going to talk about tiered differentiated instruction, and our students who are on track or above track should be accelerated. They shouldn't be teaching level 1 students. So that is why we're talking about equitable success. That means remediation for level 1 students, as well as acceleration for the students who are at or above grade level. Our outstanding needs, which Dr. Jordan has addressed earlier today in our curriculum meeting, we're looking for an infinite campus student data triangulation system for MTSS. We do have it now. We're looking forward to getting trained on it so that, as Dr. Lyle said earlier, we can triangulate student data in the area of attendance, academics, and behavior. Right now, the high school has been pulling that data manually for years, when we should be able to access a data dashboard that pulls that information for us, so we can put more of our efforts in analyzing the data instead of disaggregating the data. So hopefully we're looking forward to that training. And again, adequate staffing for the CPT. I explained how CPT works. We need the teachers to be present to do the CPT work. It's really important part of our school improvement planning. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? Yes. In terms of CPT? Well, again, when we're looking at the data, we have to pull this data manually. So we spend a lot of time disaggregating data as opposed to analyzing the data. So having this triangulation system will cut that whole disaggregation system out. We can just literally pull the data. Exactly.
Talk a little bit about IEP knowledge and how we need to be more familiar on the teaching level, instructional level, in the classroom. What barriers are there? Why don't teachers know about these IEPs? And why is implementation delayed? Because we know if they don't know about it, it takes a little while to catch up. Like, oh, so it's something A, as far as the combination, and when they don't get it, it delays the impact of the academic success. So what else are you seeing?
Okay, and anybody else can jump in. But I will say that they see the IEPs, they sign off on the IEPs, but now professional development and how to implement the best strategies for those IEPs, and we're seeing that. Dr. Gallagher has, she has a partnership now. In fact, it starts tomorrow with professional development in the area of special education, so we are super happy to see that we will start with ICT professional development tomorrow, how co-teachers can work together and help address student IEPs and give them the supports that they need. So really my answer is professional development, which has been lacking in that area, which is the truth. And now it's starting tomorrow. We look forward to the progress that we will see in that area, and thank you, Dr. Gallagher.
And then finally, for Dr. Lyle, talk a little bit about RISE, restorative practices. Talk a little bit about what RISE stands for, and how you guys adopted that model as your go-to.
Okay, so I can speak to that as well, help develop the program. RISE is reflect, improve, success, empower. So I really love the RISE program. So as opposed to students just going to detention, they will complete a character education module aligned to their behavior infraction. For example, if they were disrespectful to a teacher, the RISE advisor will look at their write-up in Infinite Campus, schedule for them to complete in a program that we have. It's a free program actually called EverFi, and that student will get a push to complete this module on respect. Or vaping. One example was vaping last year, where the young lady completed the vaping character module and was blown away by the detrimental impact of vaping, and she never vaped again. Then after that, they'll close it with a restorative circle reflection activity. So it's not punitive, it's restorative, and it's giving them an opportunity to learn from their behaviors and learn coping skills and modification, as opposed to just being punished. So, right, so the purpose of it is to disrupt the school to prison pipeline. I'll read the blurb. RISE is a restorative in-school alternative to suspension designed to foster student growth, accountability, and character development. Taking place during lunch periods, the program replaces traditional punitive measures with a structured, supportive environment where students reflect on their behavior, engage in self-guided learning, and participate in restorative practices. RISE aims to reduce exclusionary discipline practices, interrupt the school to prison pipeline, promote student voice, reflection, and personal growth, and strengthen school climate through restorative approaches. You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you all. And as we talk about the RISE program, that program is being implemented. Simply, we have great kids here at Wyandanch High School. I need to first say that, all right? We don't have any gang issues and major disruption in the building for the last couple of years, as you know, right? Last year, we had one male fight the entire 180 days of school. So when we're talking about character, we're teaching character, all right? It's essential to the growth socially for our students. And what I love most is when I hear them correcting each other. Even in the inappropriate language at times, they'll correct each other and say, you need to use different vocabulary words, all right? So we're building on that, and we want to continue to do so. But I want the community to understand how, the graduation rate works. Because when you look at it, you might look at it in a sense that, oh, this is terrible. But what I want you to look at, because at times we have a misinformation in this community, and that happens a lot, right? And we are here, and should be here, to uplift our community. And so we want to deal with facts. And the fact is, if you want to really get a sense of what and how graduation rate works, you look at when the students walk into the high school. 9th grade, you look at that data. And after 8th grade, all right, the 8th grade data is what you look at first. And then from that data, you look at what it is when they leave here, how much growth to get them to graduate. I will say this quote from the state when they visit Wyandanch High School. The high school is doing miracles pertaining to what we do to get kids to graduate. So I'm saying that to say this. We will never use any excuses. We will use what we have. But we can do so much better when we do it together. So I thank you for listening, and I pray we will get better. Our graduation rate will go up.
So let's give another round of applause for our siblings. I want to thank you and your team. I want to thank your scholars for coming out this evening. We kept you a little later, than we wanted to, but we appreciate all you waiting for us to finish the business and executive session. So thanks again. That's the work. We talk about, we've talked a lot about One Wyandanch this year, and so as we come together for our scholars. And as we come together for our scholars across the district, we'll not only have increased graduation rates, but we'll also have our younger scholars needs being met as well. So we'll work together on that. And families, we need you to let us know what your needs are. We're here to help. We're not here to create the barriers. We're trying to knock those barriers over so that all of our scholars will be the best version of themselves. So thank you once again, high school, for your presentation. Next, I want to move forward with, we have our architects from H2M, Megan Holtz and Steve. They're here, Steve Muller, they're here to present to us this evening on the progress on our early childhood center. As you know, our groundbreaking ceremony took place approximately a month ago at this point, and if you've been over a straight path since your office, you see that the progress has already started. So they're just here tonight to give us an update. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. So as Dr. Wright let everybody know, we did have the groundbreaking ceremony, and since then the construction fence has gone up in the area where we are going to be performing all of our construction work for the Early Childhood Center. Behind that fence, a lot of stuff has been going on. So far, our construction team has removed all the trees that were on site in the area where we're building our building. They've begun excavating certain areas, so our building is broken up into 3 portions. For everybody who's seen what it looks like before, we have area A, B, and C. So currently they're excavating in the area where we're putting the basement and the classrooms for the pre-K students. in that excavating area. They've dug all the way down to where we're going to be putting our footings and foundations. The form work has gone in place in those areas. That is all the wood pieces that go around for the concrete to be poured into, as well as all the rebar. They are currently actually pouring the concrete as of this morning, and that will all be done. The area where the parking lot used to be, that is now broken off, half of it is gone. They've excavated that area as well, down to provide proper drainage that's needed for the parking lot as well as for the remainder of the building. We have a drainage system that's going in there. The last area that our contractors have begun excavation in is the area where we're going to have our drainage retention system. That's slowly to let the water that's collected in all the drainage systems flow into the ground, so that way it's not an overflow at a time being. When we originally started this project back in 2022, 2023, we had initial testing done on this area, because years ago, before this district owned this piece of property, it was a dumping ground, so we knew that there would be some contaminants in the site. When we tested the area, we saw where there might be some areas that we'd have to investigate even further. When we got the report back, we presented that to the DEC, and they came up with a plan along with Steve on our environmental team on how to mitigate any contaminants or things that we might find in the ground. Contaminants could be anywhere from tree pieces or bricks or concrete to other things. When digging in this area where we're putting the Coltec system, that's the drainage system is called, we came across some barrels of oil and some tires. When stuff like this comes up, it's stuff that has to get removed from the ground. It can't go back in because we all know that this is not healthy or proper for the soil. We had Steve and our DEC department come out. We excavated everything on, and they're testing it all, and they're going to be putting new, fresh, clean soil in this area. It's important to note that when reviewing all of the test results and everything out there, that we do all the proper measures for what is needed for the environment and for our student body and for everybody using the site today and 30 years from now. So some preventative measures that we're taking is across the whole site where we're doing work, we are putting 2 feet of clean soil in and a barrier system. And underneath the building, we're also putting a vapor mitigation system that will lie between the soil and the new building, and it will take any vapors that could potentially be in the soil, and they will get dispersed in the air. Once they hit the air, they actually dissipate and they dissolve because they're hitting the fresh air. It's almost a good example would be if you took a bottle of seltzer and you had the cap on and you shook it up until it hits the fresh air, it's the pressure that builds up. But that is currently where we are right now as far as it goes for all construction. All proper testing and investigation is being done, and at any time any issues come up in excavating, we are addressing it as soon as we possibly can.
All right, so moving right along, we're just going to go into the receiving and hearing of delegates. I have 2 names. The first is Mr. Vincent James. Is he here? No? Okay. So the second is Dr. Jamal Hudson. You can come on up to the podium. You'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. With the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, I greet you with peace. Assalamu alaikum. That means peace be upon you in the Arabic language. My name is Dr. Jamal Hudson. I'm a professor of rhetoric and advocacy at Baruch College and Hofstra University. And today I stand before you with a new opportunity with the permission of our superintendent, the board, and our athletic director. I've been recently hired as the wrestling coach here in Wyandanch School District. And I want to, for just a brief few moments, speak about what my intentions are in accepting this opportunity. And I'm so fortunate to have my father here with me today, who is and has been a great model and example for me. He saw my energy and zeal when I was a younger man and placed me in the sport of wrestling. And I first thought it was WWE. And little did I know that that would lead me on a trajectory and path in my life where I was fortunate in high school to go to St. Anthony's and win a New York State public championship in wrestling, get a scholarship to Hofstra, where I earned my bachelor's and master's in 4 years and was an academic All-American, and then went to Virginia and got my PhD and now teach at the university. And all of that is a result of what wrestling was able to do for me. And a lot of my service and teaching took place and still does in private education and private institutions. But I've had a calling and a desire to serve the public, to be where the people are, we the people, in order for a more perfect union, to be with the people. And my mother is a product of this community. I am the imam at the Islamic Center right here on Straight Path, also the Muslim Islamic Center. So I have a desire to see young people, both male and female, who may have an interest in wrestling, to come out and try the sport. I've been listening to this discussion on character and this discussion on cultivating the skills of our young people, so that for me, wrestling is a conduit. It's a means and a way to help our students who have energy and zeal and a passion that they want to be able to exert. I invite you to try the sport, and I invite our community to support this sport. Anytime you start with a new program from scratch, you know, it'll take some time, but I believe with buy-in, with the community support, we can produce scholar athletes that see wrestling as an opportunity to develop on the mat. But for me, it's the academics, it's the mind, it's the skills of character and content that I think will help make Wyandanch, as I've been listening to, one Wyandanch, one community, one unity that makes this, this district a light. You know, I'm from the area, and I've heard all the misnomers. I've heard all about Straight Path. You know, school districts that say, well, you could have went to Wheatley Heights, you could have went to, you name the district. I am here in Wyandanch because I believe there's life in Wyandanch. I believe that there's an opportunity in Wyandanch, and by the permission of our Lord, I pray to be able to give back and serve. So I thank our superintendent, I thank our board, I thank our athletic director, Dr. Scarlett, and I thank each of you for supporting this district, supporting our students, and supporting Wyandanch athletics. Thank you, and God bless.
That was all the names that I had on the list. Were there any other community members that wanted to speak at this time? All right, hearing none, we can move forward with the next part, which are resolutions. Thank you once again to Wyandanch Memorial High School, their students, and their leadership for their incredible presentations tonight. Thank you for all of our public, absolutely, round of applause to them. Go ahead, round of applause. And thank you for all of our important updates. And now it's time for the action and the business on our resolutions. What is the pleasure of the board concerning our resolutions? Is it safe to block vote? Do you want to go by department? What's your pleasure? Our student representative says block vote. There's no objection here, with the exception of Personnel 10B11, letter A, Curriculum 10D2, and there's one other, correct? Personnel 10B, well, we got that one. What else? 10B3? 10B3. Motion to block vote.
Corbin, who will second? Moore. Any questions?
Yes, just one question.
Certainly.
Are we replacing 10D1 with what we have in front of us? The new packet?
Yes, we are.
Okay. So then I would ask that we remove what we adopted in the agenda first. So I can help you out with that. So we'll pull that and then handle it after the vote.
We'll just do a motion to amend the agenda to include 10D1 as it stands in its revised form.
Morris?
Walker, questions? Hearing none. All in favor, any opposed or abstaining? The count on that amendment is 7. The block vote is now in motion. We have Corbin Moore. Was there anything else? No problem. So Corbin Moore, any other questions? Hearing none. All in favor? Any opposed or abstaining? The count is 7. Now for the actual vote. Is there a first?
Morris?
Morris, Walker, any questions? All in favor? Any opposed or abstaining? The count now is 7-0-0 on all resolutions. Give your Board of Education a round of applause.
Madam Chair?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
I would ask that we amend the agenda to add personal resolution number 23 to resignations.
Let's do that. Motion to amend the agenda to include personnel 23. Is there a first? Moore. Who will second?
Morris?
Morris. Questions? Hearing none. All in favor? Any opposed or abstaining? Count on that is 7. Mr. Chase, I saw your hand go up. Talk to me.
Well, actually, it's for the business part,
Yes, sir.
10C2. I believe that's supposed to be done by a roll call vote.
Okay.
The tax levy.
You're absolutely right. So considering we just passed it, can we just do, tell me, Counselor, can we? Let's take a look at it really quick. Let's go to 10C3 in business. I rescind the motion to,
Madam Chair, I move that we rescind
do that.
10C2
C2.
for the purpose of a roll call vote.
Who will first? Baker. Corbin. All in favor? Any opposed or abstaining? Count is 7. Now for the roll call vote, Jessica Reed, please do the pleasure.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. So for 10C2, business number 2, the question of the adoption of the foregoing resolution was duly put to a vote and a roll call, which resulted in the following. So President Walker.
Affirmative.
Vice President Shirley Baker. Trustee Shamika Brown. Trustee Kathy Corbin.
Yes.
Trustee Felice Holder. Trustee Brenda Moore. Trustee Gerard Morris.
Yes.
I received 7 affirmatives.
Motion passes. Anything additional regarding our resolutions tonight, Counselor? Have we set? Go ahead.
I'd like to place a motion on the floor to approve personnel resolution number 23. We only have.
Oh, we didn't do that. I'm sorry.
Correct.
Sure. Personnel number 10B23. On the floor. Motion?
Morris.
Walker. Questions? None. All in favor? Any opposed or abstaining? 7. That now takes care of 10B1 for curriculum, 10B23 in personnel, and 1023, right? That was last one. Anything else? Nothing. Counselor, have you satisfactorily assigned and voted on all our resolutions for the night?
Yes.
Is there anything else, Board of Education? Ma'am? We did it already. Hearing and seeing nothing. Motion to adjourn.
Morris.
Walker, questions? All in favor? Any opposed or abstaining? The count is 7-0-0 at 8:15 p.m. Ladies and gentlemen of the community, families, administrative staff,